Part 1. The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure built around a dying star. Inside, representatives from 73 different species sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen, others methane, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special fields. The chamber had been designed to accommodate everyone, a symbol of the great peace that had lasted for 10,000 years. Ambassador Lisa Harper stood in the human section, her hands gripping the smooth metal of the speaking platform. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, checking and rechecking the data her team had gathered. The evidence was clear. The Xinthian Collective was building a war fleet in secret, violating every treaty that held the council together. She pressed a button, and holographic images appeared above the center of the chamber. The images showed massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, new weapons being tested on remote moons, and military formations that had no purpose except conquest. The data had taken months to collect, and it had cost 3 human intelligence officers their lives. High Chancellor Vexthar watched from his elevated position, his serpentine body coiled around his seat, scales reflecting the dim light. His eyes, cold and calculating, showed no emotion as he studied the evidence. After a long silence, he spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. "The Council finds these accusations troubling, Ambassador Harper. However, the Xinthian Collective has been a valued member of this body for 8,000 years. They have contributed greatly to our scientific advancement and cultural exchange. Are we to believe they would suddenly abandon the principles of peace?" Harper felt her jaw tighten. She had expected resistance, but she had hoped the evidence would speak for itself. She took a breath and continued. "The evidence is clear, High Chancellor. We have sensor logs, intercepted communications, and visual confirmation from multiple sources. The Xinthians are preparing for war." A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species made clicking noises, others hummed, and a few released pheromones that the translation systems converted into words. The general sentiment was clear. They did not believe her. The Xinthian ambassador rose from his section. Kelvar was a being of living crystal, his body refracting light into rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice was like wind chimes, musical and cold. "Ambassador Harper's species has been part of this council for barely 200 years. Perhaps in their inexperience they see threats where none exist. Humans are known for their paranoia, are they not? Their history is filled with wars and conflicts. Perhaps they cannot imagine a universe at peace." Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. The sound cut through Harper like a knife. She had known this would be difficult, but she had not expected open mockery. She glanced at the holographic evidence still floating above the chamber, wondering how they could ignore what was right in front of them. A delegate from the Karathi Dominion stood up. The Karathi were insectoid beings with compound eyes and chitinous armor. The delegate's wings buzzed as she spoke. "I must agree with Ambassador Kelvar. The humans have a history of aggression. Perhaps this is a projection of their own nature. The Xinthians have shown nothing but peaceful intent for millennia." Harper's hands gripped the platform harder. She could feel her fingernails digging into her palms. The dismissal stung more than the mockery. They were not even considering the evidence. They had already decided that humanity was wrong simply because humanity was young. High Chancellor Vexthar raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Harper, the Council appreciates your concern. However, we must also consider that your species is still on probationary status. You were granted limited membership only 50 years ago. Perhaps it would be wise to focus on proving your own worthiness to this body, rather than making accusations against established members." The words hung in the air like a slap. Harper felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. She had come here expecting debate, perhaps even argument, but she had not expected to be dismissed like a child making up stories. "Very well," Harper said quietly. "Humanity has presented its evidence. We have fulfilled our obligation to warn this council of a clear and present danger. What you choose to do with that information is your decision, but know this. If the Xinthians attack, humanity will remember this day. We will remember who stood with us and who laughed at us." She deactivated the holographic display and walked back to her seat. The chamber buzzed with conversation as the various species discussed the dramatic human and her paranoid warnings. No one seemed concerned. The peace had lasted for 10,000 years. Why would it end now? Later that evening, Harper sat in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel. She stared at the report spread across her desk, feeling a mixture of anger and frustration. Her assistant, a young man named Kyle Bennett, entered with a cup of coffee. They did not listen, Kyle said. It was not a question. He had watched the council session from the observation deck. No, Harper replied. They did not. They think we are paranoid children playing at politics. She took the coffee and sipped it, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them the council has refused to act. We need to implement defensive protocols immediately. Kyle nodded and left to send the message. Harper turned to look out the window at the vast expanse of space. Somewhere out there, the Xinthians were preparing for war, and when they struck, the council would realize too late that humanity had been right all along. Captain Jake Morrison received the message from Ambassador Harper 3 hours later. He was aboard the defense station orbiting Proxima Colony, one of humanity's largest settlements outside the Sol system. The station was technically a civilian facility, but Morrison knew better. It had been designed with hidden weapon ports and reinforced hull plating. Humanity had learned long ago never to build anything that could not defend itself. Morrison was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. He had fought in the border wars, the conflicts between human colonies and pirates that the council pretended did not exist. He knew what war looked like, and he knew it was coming. He called his senior officers to the command center. Commander Greg Patterson arrived first. Patterson ran the station's intelligence division, and he had been tracking Xinthian movements for months. Behind him came Lieutenant Nina Clark, the station's weapons officer, and Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez. Morrison displayed Harper's message on the main screen. The Council has refused to act. We are authorized to begin defensive preparations. I want all weapon systems brought online within 24 hours. Patterson, increase surveillance on all Xinthian ships in our sector. Clark, run diagnostics on every missile and railgun we have. Mendez, I need those shield generators at full capacity. The officers nodded and left to carry out their orders. Morrison stood alone in the command center, staring at the tactical display showing human colonies scattered across this region of space. They were vulnerable, spread out over dozens of systems with minimal defenses. The Council had rules about military buildups, rules that humanity had followed carefully. But those rules meant nothing if the Xinthians were breaking them. He thought about the Council session and the way they had dismissed Ambassador Harper's warnings. The arrogance of it made his blood boil. These ancient species had enjoyed peace for so long, they had forgotten what it cost to maintain it. They thought peace was the natural state of the universe, something that existed simply because they wished it to. Humanity knew better. Peace was not natural. Peace was maintained through strength, vigilance, and the willingness to fight when necessary. Earth had learned that lesson through 2 world wars, countless regional conflicts, and the near destruction of human civilization during the resource wars of the 22nd century. Morrison pulled up a secure channel to Earth Command and recorded a brief message. The Council has refused to act on the Xinthian threat. Recommend immediate mobilization of reserve forces and acceleration of Project Ragnarok. If the Xinthians move against Council species, we need to be ready to respond with overwhelming force. Morrison out. He sent the message and turned back to the tactical display. The peace was about to end. The Council did not know it yet, but their 10,000 years of tranquility were in the final hours. And when the war came, humanity would be ready. They had to be, because no one else was. Part 2. 3 months passed with deceptive calm. The Council continued its regular sessions, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Ambassador Harper attended each meeting, watching and waiting. The Xinthian ambassador smiled his crystalline smile and spoke eloquently about cooperation and unity. No one mentioned the warnings humanity had given. Then the hammer fell. The attack came at dawn across 6 different systems simultaneously. The Xinthian fleet emerged from concealed positions and struck with devastating precision. Their targets were carefully chosen for maximum psychological impact. The Delphine colonies were hit first, peaceful aquatic beings whose cities floated in vast oceans. Within hours, 3 of their worlds were burning. The Karathi Dominion, whose delegate had mocked Harper in the council chamber, found their home system under siege. Xinthian warships tore through their defenses like paper. The insectoid warriors fought bravely, but they had not prepared for real war in over 1,000 years. Their weapons were outdated, their tactics ancient and their will to fight had grown soft during the long peace. Emergency signals flooded the Council's communication network. Distress calls, pleas for help, and desperate requests for military assistance poured in from every direction. The Council chamber, which had been so calm and dignified 3 months earlier, descended into chaos. High Chancellor Vexthar called an emergency session. Representatives arrived in various states of panic. Some species were openly weeping, their forms shaking with fear. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. The chamber that had echoed with laughter at humanity's warnings now filled with the sounds of terror and recrimination. The Delphine representative, a graceful being named Marilla, stood with tears streaming down her face. Her voice broke as she described the destruction of her homeworld's capital city. 7 million of my people are dead, she said. Our defenses collapsed in minutes. The Xinthians showed no mercy. They targeted civilian centers, cultural sites, schools full of children. This is not war. This is extermination. Vexthar's scales had lost their shine. He looked older somehow, diminished. The Council had intelligence, he admitted quietly. We knew the Xinthians were expanding their military capabilities, but we chose to interpret this as defensive preparations. We did not want to believe that one of our founding members would betray us. Ambassador Harper stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. She felt no satisfaction in being proven right. There was only a cold fury that burned in her chest like ice. 3 months ago, she began, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. I stood before this council and presented evidence of Xinthian military buildup. I showed you sensor data, intercepted communications, and visual confirmation of treaty violations. And what did this council do? She paused, letting the silence stretch. You laughed. You dismissed my warnings as paranoia. You suggested that humanity was projecting its own violent nature onto civilized species. You told me to focus on proving my worthiness rather than making accusations. Several delegates looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Harper continued. Your arrogance has cost millions of lives. Your refusal to act has given the Xinthians 3 additional months to prepare. 3 months to position their forces, to perfect their weapons, to plan their attacks down to the last detail. The Karathi delegate, the same one who had agreed with the Xinthian ambassador 3 months earlier, spoke up. Her voice was bitter. What would you have us do now, Ambassador Harper? Our fleets are destroyed or scattered. Our worlds burn while we sit here talking. Will humanity's superiority complex save us? Harper's expression did not change. Humanity prepared, she said simply. While you maintained your precious illusion of eternal peace, we mobilized our defenses. We built weapons. We trained soldiers. We ran combat simulations. Because unlike you, we remembered that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is something you fight for every single day. A holographic display activated, showing a tactical map of human space. Red markers indicated Xinthian fleet positions. Green markers showed human military assets. There were far more green markers than anyone expected. Earth Command has authorized me to offer military assistance to any Council species that requests it, Harper said. We have 12 battle groups ready for immediate deployment. We have weapons platforms, missile batteries, and shield generators that can be transported to your systems within days. And we have soldiers who know how to fight. The chamber erupted in conversation. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly looked at them with desperate hope. The Delphine representative pushed through the crowd to reach Harper. Please, Marilla begged. My people are dying. The Xinthians have blockaded our homeworld. Without help, we have days before complete collapse. Harper nodded. We will send the 3rd Fleet immediately. They specialize in breaking blockades. But understand this, we do things our way. We use our tactics, our strategies, our weapons. If you want our help, you accept our methods. Maralla did not hesitate, agreed. Anything. Just save my people. Other delegates rushed forward, pushing and shoving to reach the human ambassador. The Karathi, the Plenthians, the Vorash, even species that had never spoken to humanity before. All of them begged for assistance, offering trade deals, technology, and political concessions in exchange for military support. High Chancellor Vexthar watched this scene with growing horror. The council was falling apart. The careful balance of power that had existed for 10,000 years was collapsing. And at the center of it stood a human, the representative of a species the council had dismissed as primitive and aggressive. Ambassador Harper, Vexthar said, his voice barely audible over the chaos. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request Earth's military assistance in repelling the Xinthian aggression. We were wrong to dismiss your warnings. We were wrong about many things. Harper looked at him for a long moment. The apology meant nothing to her. Words would not bring back the dead or undo the damage. But the request for help was something concrete. It was an acknowledgement that humanity had been right all along. Earth accepts, she said, but when this is over, there will be changes. The Council's structure, its treaties, its military policies, everything will be reviewed. This can never happen again. Vexthar nodded slowly. Agreed. As the Council session broke up, delegates rushed to their ships to return home and coordinate with human military forces. Harper remained behind, standing in the empty chamber. Her assistant Kyle found her there, staring at the spot where the Xinthian ambassador had once stood. The fleet is ready to move, Kyle reported.
Captain Morrison has already dispatched forces to the Delphine system.
Admiral Sullivan is assembling the main battle group for a push into Xinthian territory. Good, Harper said. She felt tired suddenly, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. How many dead so far? Kyle hesitated. Estimates range from 10 to 15 million across all attacked systems. The numbers are still coming in. 15 million people dead because the Council refused to listen. Harper closed her eyes, feeling sick. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need everything. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. This is not going to be a short war. Kyle nodded and left to send the message. Harper remained in the chamber alone. Outside the windows, she could see the distant glow of the neutron star. It had witnessed 10,000 years of peace. Now it would witness war. And when the fighting was done, the galaxy would never be the same. In the Delphine system, Xinthian warships continued their assault. They had expected easy victory, a quick demonstration of power that would force the Council to submit. What they did not know was that human ships were already on their way, and humans fought differently than any species the Xinthians had ever encountered. The Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Delphine system. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display light up with enemy contacts. There were 37 Xinthian vessels between his fleet and the Delphine homeworld. The odds were not good, but Morrison had fought worse. All ships, he said calmly. Battle stations. Load weapons. Prepare to engage. And remember, the galaxy is watching. Let us show them what humans can do. Part 3, the Third Fleet entered the Delphine system like a storm. Captain Morrison watched the tactical display as his ship spread into attack formation. The Xinthian blockade fleet outnumbered them, but Morrison had advantages they did not expect. Human ships were smaller, faster, and built for one purpose only: war. The Xinthian commander sent a standard warning transmission. Human vessels, you are interfering in Xinthian territory. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Morrison smiled grimly. He had no intention of withdrawing. Launch drones, he ordered. Target their sensor arrays first. I want them blind before we close the distance. Hundreds of small attack drones shot forward from the human ships. They were cheap, disposable, and packed with explosives. The Xinthians fired their advanced beam weapons, destroying dozens of drones with each shot. But there were too many. The drones swarmed over the Xinthian ships like angry insects, exploding against sensor dishes and communication arrays. The Xinthian fleet scattered, trying to create distance. They had trained for elegant warfare, ship-to-ship duels where technology and tactics decided the victor. They had not trained for this chaos, this swarm of suicidal machines that threw themselves at their vessels with reckless abandon. Morrison pressed the advantage. All ships flank speed, getting close where their beam weapons cannot track us. Railguns fire at will. The human fleet accelerated hard, engines burning at maximum capacity. The crews endured crushing force as their ships closed the distance. Xinthian vessels tried to maneuver, but their commanders could not adjust to the speed and aggression of the human attack. Within minutes, human ships were among them, firing kinetic projectiles at point-blank range. A Xinthian cruiser exploded as a railgun slug punched through its reactor. Another lost power when electromagnetic pulse missiles fried its systems. The elegant formations of the blockade fleet dissolved into confused, individual battles where the Xinthians found themselves. Outmaneuvered and overwhelmed, Morrison watched his tactical display with satisfaction. Two of his ships had taken damage, but the Xinthian fleet was breaking apart. They had expected an enemy that fought by the rules, one that valued preservation of ships and crew. Instead, they faced humans who were willing to sacrifice everything to achieve their objectives. One human destroyer, badly damaged and losing atmosphere, rammed a Xinthian battleship rather than retreat. The impact destroyed both vessels, but it cleared a path for the rest of the fleet to reach the Delphine homeworld. Morrison noted the destroyer's name and made a mental note to recommend medals for the crew. If any had survived, the battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 21 Xinthian ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining vessels fled into faster-than-light travel, carrying reports of human tactics that would shock Xinthian high command. Morrison had lost 4 ships and taken heavy damage on 6 more, but he had broken the blockade. The Delphine government sent a transmission filled with gratitude and disbelief. They had watched the battle from their cities below, expecting to witness their final defeat. Instead, they saw the humans fight with a ferocity that seemed impossible for civilized beings. News of the victory spread quickly through council space. Other species watched recordings of the battle with mixed emotions. Relief that the Xinthians could be beaten, shock at the brutal efficiency of human warfare, and a growing realization that humanity was unlike any species they had encountered before. At Earth Command Headquarters, Admiral Kate Sullivan reviewed battle reports from across the conflict zone. The tall woman with steel-gray hair had spent 40 years in military service, rising through the ranks during peacetime. Now war had come, and she intended to win it decisively. Her staff assembled in the war room, a cavernous chamber filled with holographic displays and tactical projections. Commander Patterson stood beside her, holding a data tablet with intelligence summaries. Lieutenant Clark worked at a weapons console, coordinating missile deployments across 3 sectors. Chief Engineer Mendez oversaw the repair schedules for damaged vessels. The Xinthians have pulled back to their core systems, Patterson reported. They are regrouping and reinforcing their defensive positions. Our intelligence suggests they did not expect effective resistance. They planned for a quick campaign of intimidation. Sullivan nodded. Then we hit them before they can adapt. I want strike forces assembled for deep penetration raids. We target their supply lines, their shipyards, their fuel depots. Make them understand that we can reach them anywhere. A young officer raised his hand hesitantly. Admiral, the Council has expressed concern about our tactics. They say our methods are too aggressive, too willing to accept casualties. Some species are calling for negotiations with the Xinthians. Sullivan's expression hardened. The Council had 10,000 years to negotiate. They negotiated right up until the moment the Xinthians started killing them. Now we fight. If they do not like our methods, they are welcome to handle this themselves. The officer sat back down, chastened. Everyone in the room understood the Admiral's point. The Council had failed. Humanity had warned them, and they had laughed. Now humans were dying to clean up the Council's mess, and they would do it their own way. Dr. Henry Cross entered the room, carrying a secured data case. The elderly scientist had white hair and tired eyes, but his mind remained sharp. He had spent the last decade working on classified military projects, developing weapons that pushed the boundaries of Council treaties. Admiral, Cross said, Project Ragnarok is ready for deployment. We have completed testing on the first squadron. Sullivan turned to face him. Tell me about Ragnarok, Doctor. What exactly have you built? Cross activated a holographic display showing sleek warships with unusual configurations. These are AI-controlled combat vessels. No crew, no life support, no gravity generators. They can accelerate at forces that would kill any biological pilot. They can make turns and maneuvers impossible for crewed ships. Several officers leaned forward, studying the designs with interest. Patterson whistled softly. How fast can they move? Sustained acceleration of 15 gravities, Cross replied. Short bursts up to 30. They carry reduced weapons loads compared to crewed vessels, but their speed and maneuverability more than compensate. In simulations, a single Ragnarok unit can engage and defeat 3 conventional warships. Sullivan studied the holographic ships, her mind already calculating how to deploy them. The Council will object to AI warships. They have treaties prohibiting autonomous weapon systems. Cross smiled thinly. The Council also had treaties prohibiting military buildups and surprise attacks. The Xinthians violated those treaties when they launched this war. I believe we are justified in using any means necessary to end it. The Admiral nodded slowly. Deploy the first squadron to Captain Morrison's fleet. I want combat data before we commit the full force. If they perform as promised, we will mass produce them. Cross departed to arrange the transfer. Sullivan turned back to the tactical displays, watching the shifting markers that represented fleets and battles across a dozen systems. The war was just beginning and humanity was committed now. There could be no half measures, no hesitation. Ambassador Harper's voice came through on a secure channel. Admiral Sullivan, I have news from the Council. They have officially recognized Earth as the military coordinator for all defensive operations. You now have authority to direct Council forces as you see fit. Sullivan absorbed this information with satisfaction. Finally, the Council was acknowledging reality. They had no choice. Their own military forces had proven inadequate, and human tactics were the only thing standing between them and Xinthian conquest. Thank you, Ambassador. Tell the Council that we will drive the Xinthians back to their territory and ensure they never threaten anyone again. But it will be done our way. No interference, no second-guessing, no political constraints. This is war, and war is what we do best. Understood, Harper replied. And Admiral, be careful. The galaxy is watching. What we do here will define humanity's place in the Council for generations to come. Sullivan ended the transmission and looked at her assembled staff. They were young and old, veterans and newcomers, but they all shared one thing. They knew how to fight. All right, people. The Council has given us control. Now let us show them why that was the right decision. Send orders to all fleet commanders. We are taking the offensive. The Xinthians wanted war. Let us give them more than they can handle. Part 4. 8 months into the war, the galaxy had learned to fear human warfare. The elegant tactics taught in Council military academies proved useless against enemies who fought with such relentless aggression. Xinthian commanders found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who accepted casualties that would have broken any other species. A delegation from the Council arrived at the human warship, Defender, to observe operations firsthand. The delegation included representatives from 12 species, all of them curious and horrified by human military success. They wanted to understand how such a young species had become so effective at war. Captain Morrison met them at the airlock. He looked tired. All human soldiers looked tired. The delegation members noticed immediately that human ships operated under conditions that violated every Council standard for crew comfort. Sleeping quarters were cramped, with soldiers taking shifts in narrow bunks. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and weapon coolant. Maintenance crews worked around the clock, grabbing sleep when they could. A Plenthian delegate, a floating creature of gas and light, expressed confusion. Captain Morrison, your crew appears exhausted. Why do you not rotate them to fresh units? Morrison led them through the corridors, past soldiers cleaning weapons and engineers repairing damaged systems. Because we do not have fresh units to spare, he replied bluntly. Every human ship is committed to combat operations. Our soldiers work until the job is done, then they rest. The delegates watched human Marines conducting training exercises in the ship's small gym. The exercises were brutal, designed to build endurance and toughness. One Marine collapsed from exhaustion and was immediately pulled up by her squad mates who would not let her quit. This seems cruel, another delegate observed. The Delphine representative Marilla, who had seen her people saved by these same humans, shook her head sadly. She had learned what the others were just discovering. Human warfare was not clean or comfortable. It was hard, dirty, and demanded everything from those who practiced it. Commander Patterson joined the tour and led the delegation to a conference room. He activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's history. These are scenes from our world wars, he explained. The 20th century saw 2 global conflicts that killed over 100 million people combined. We fought with chemical weapons, atomic bombs, and tactics designed for mass slaughter. The delegates recoiled from the images. They saw trenches filled with dead soldiers, cities reduced to rubble, civilians huddling in bombed-out buildings. They saw the aftermath of atomic weapons, the mushroom clouds that had defined an era of human history. You used nuclear weapons on your own planet? One delegate asked, his voice filled with horror. Twice, Patterson confirmed, and we came very close to using them again during the Cold War. Humanity understands total war in a way that Council species have forgotten. You have enjoyed peace for so long that you forgot what it cost to maintain it. The delegates left the briefing shaken. They had come expecting to learn tactics. Instead, they learned that human warfare was built on a foundation of historical trauma that shaped every aspect of their military thinking. Humans prepared for the worst because they had lived through it. The war reached a critical point when the Xinthians launched a massive assault on the Delphine homeworld. They intended to break the Coalition's morale by destroying the species humanity had fought so hard to protect. 50 Xinthian warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and began bombarding the planet's surface. Captain Morrison was in the system with only 15 ships, badly outnumbered and outgunned. His officers recommended retreat, but Morrison refused. The Delphines had become a symbol of the war. If they fell, the entire coalition might collapse. All ships prepare for defensive operations, Morrison ordered. We hold this system no matter the cost. Lieutenant Clark, what is the status of our missile inventory? 40% remaining, sir. Clark reported from her weapons station. We have enough for one major engagement, maybe two if we are careful. Then we make it count. Morrison studied the tactical display, his mind calculating angles and probabilities. The Xinthians had superior numbers, but they had fallen into a predictable formation. They thought they had already won. The battle began with Morrison's fleet diving straight into the Xinthian formation. The enemy expected the humans to use their speed for hit-and-run attacks. Instead, Morrison committed to a close-quarters fight where superior numbers mattered less than aggression and skill. Human ships twisted and turned through the Xinthian fleet, firing at point-blank range and using the enemy vessels as cover against each other. Morrison broadcast an open transmission to the Xinthian fleet commander, an ancient tradition of single combat to spare further bloodshed. Commander of the Xinthian fleet, Morrison called out. I challenge you to single combat. Your ship against mine. Winner takes the system. Are you brave enough to face me alone, or do you hide behind your fleet? The Xinthian commander's response dripped with contempt. You insult me with your primitive customs, human. The Xinthian collective does not recognize such barbaric challenges. We will crush your forces and reduce the Delphine world to ash. Morrison had expected the refusal, but the challenge served its purpose. It revealed the Xinthian commander's arrogance and gave Morrison a psychological edge. The Xinthians viewed humans as primitives. That made them underestimate human capabilities. The battle raged for 72 hours. Morrison rotated his crews in shifts, keeping fresh soldiers at every station. His ships took terrible damage, but they fought with a determination that shocked the Xinthians. Human vessels that lost primary weapons switched to secondaries. Ships that lost engines used maneuvering thrusters to position themselves for final attacks. On the second day, reinforcements arrived. Admiral Sullivan brought the main battle group, including the first squadron of Ragnarok AI ships. The unmanned vessels tore through the Xinthian formations with impossible maneuvers, pulling acceleration forces that would have liquefied biological pilots. But it was what came next that changed everything. With the Xinthian fleet engaged and unable to retreat, Sullivan authorized the use of the Cascade system, humanity's most controversial weapon. Dr. Cross had designed it specifically to exploit weaknesses in Xinthian reactor technology. The weapon fired, sending out a pulse of exotic radiation. It did not damage ships directly. Instead, it caused a chain reaction in the Xinthian power cores. Within minutes, 20 Xinthian vessels suffered catastrophic reactor failures. The cascading explosions lit up the system like new stars being born. The remaining Xinthian ships broke and ran, their formations shattered and their morale destroyed. They had lost 40% of their fleet in minutes. The survivors fled into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind debris fields and the burning remains of their flagship. On the Delphine homeworld, millions watched the sky as the battle ended. They had been hours away from annihilation. Now they were saved, but the cost had been horrific. 4 human ships destroyed, 8 more damaged beyond immediate repair, and over 2,000 human soldiers dead. The Council reacted to the Cascade weapon with outrage. An emergency session was called. Delegates demanded that humanity cease using such barbaric weapons. They called it inhumane, excessive, and a violation of the principles of civilized warfare. Ambassador Harper stood before the Council, her face hard as stone. You want to discuss principles of civilized warfare? Where were those principles when the Xinthians massacred 15 million Delphines? Where were they when they bombed civilian centers and targeted schools? You want humanity to fight with one hand tied behind our back while the enemy uses every weapon they possess? The Council has the right to regulate weapons used in its territory, High Chancellor Vexithar said weakly. He no longer commanded the same authority he once had. The war had diminished him, exposed the failures of his leadership. Harper's response was cold and final. The Council had 10,000 years to regulate weapons and prevent this war. You failed. Now humanity will use whatever means necessary to end the conflict you allowed to begin. If you do not like our methods, you are welcome to take command of the war effort yourselves. But we both know you cannot. You need us more than we need you. The silence that followed was absolute. Every delegate understood the truth in Harper's words. The Council had become dependent on human military power. Without it, they would fall to the Xinthians. Pride meant nothing in the face of extinction. Harper turned and left the chamber, her message delivered. Behind her, the Council descended into quiet discussions about how much control they had truly lost. The answer was becoming clear. Humanity was winning the war, and with victory would come power. The galaxy would never again dismiss the humans as primitive outsiders. Admiral Sullivan received word of the Council's protests and dismissed them with a wave of her hand. She had a war to win, and she would not let politics interfere. The cascade system had proven effective, and she intended to use it again. War was not about fairness. It was about victory. And humanity knew how to win. Part 5, 14 months after the first Xinthian attack. The war ended not with a grand battle, but with a quiet transmission. The Xinthian Collective's High Command sent an unconditional surrender to Earth, bypassing the Council entirely. They knew who had defeated them. Admiral Sullivan received the transmission aboard her flagship. She read it twice, making certain she understood correctly. The Xinthians agreed to all terms: complete disarmament, war reparations, territorial concessions, and most significantly, submission to human military oversight for the next 50 years. "It is done," she told her staff. "The war is over. We won." The officers cheered, but Sullivan did not join them. She thought of the costs. 7,000 human soldiers dead, 19 ships destroyed, countless wounded and traumatized. Victory felt hollow when measured against such losses, but she also knew that the alternative would have been worse. If humanity had not intervened, the Xinthians would have conquered the Council species one by one. Millions more would have died. Sometimes the only choice was between bad options and worse ones. The peace negotiations were held on Earth in Geneva, at the site where humans had once negotiated their own treaties after terrible wars. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. The Council came to Earth as supplicants, seeking human approval for the terms of peace. High Chancellor Vexithar arrived with a much smaller delegation than usual. He looked diminished somehow, his scales dull and his movements slow. He found Ambassador Harper in one of the conference rooms overlooking the lake. "Ambassador Harper," he began, his voice quiet. "I owe you an apology. The Council was wrong to dismiss your warnings. We were arrogant and complacent. That arrogance cost millions of lives." Harper studied him for a long moment. "Your apology means nothing to the dead, High Chancellor. It does not bring back the Delphine children who died in the first attacks. It does not heal the wounded or rebuild the destroyed cities." Vexthar nodded slowly. "I know, but perhaps it can help us build a better future. The Council was broken by this war. We need to be rebuilt, and I believe humanity should lead that rebuilding." Harper turned to look out the window. She had spent 14 months watching the war unfold, watching young soldiers go off to fight and not return. She had signed condolence letters to families, attended memorial services, and carried the weight of command. Now it was time to build something from the ashes. "Humanity accepts a permanent seat on the Council," she said. "We want full veto power over military decisions and the authority to enforce treaty compliance. We want to establish a joint intelligence network and a unified defense force, and we want changes to the Council's structure to prevent this from ever happening again." "The Council will agree to these terms," Vexthar replied. "We have no choice. But more than that, we recognize that they are necessary. The old system failed. It is time for something new." The formal peace treaty was signed 3 days later. Captain Morrison attended the ceremony, now promoted to admiral in recognition of his service. He stood among the assembled delegates wearing his dress uniform, the medals on his chest representing battles that had changed galactic history. 17 different species awarded him their highest honors. The Delphines gave him the Star of Salvation, their most prestigious military decoration. The Karathi, whose delegate had once mocked humanity, presented him with their warrior's crown. Each award came with speeches praising his courage and tactical brilliance. Morrison accepted each honor with quiet dignity. When it came time for him to speak, he kept his words simple. We fought because it was necessary. We won because we were prepared. But let this war serve as a lesson to everyone here. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace must be earned and defended every single day. The moment you take it for granted is the moment you lose it. The delegates listened in silence. They had learned this lesson the hard way, through fire and blood and loss. Morrison's words echoed through the chamber, a reminder that would shape council policy for generations to come. The Galactic Council was restructured over the following months. Ambassador Harper became co-chancellor alongside Vexthar, the first human to hold such a position. Her first act was to establish a military intelligence division that reported directly to the Chancellor's office. Commander Patterson was appointed to lead it. The new intelligence division implemented monitoring systems across council space. Every member species had to submit to regular inspections and transparency requirements. Many delegates objected, calling it invasive and insulting. Harper's response was blunt. The Xinthians built a war fleet in secret because no one was watching. That will never happen again. You can accept oversight or you can leave the council. Your choice, no one left. They all understood that the alternative to human oversight was chaos and possible extinction. The old system of trust had failed. The new system of verification was uncomfortable, but it worked. Dr. Cross presented humanity's advanced weapons technologies to a select group of council scientists. The presentation took place in a secure facility on Mars, away from civilian populations. Cross showed them the Cascade system, the Ragnarok AI ships, and other classified projects that had turned the tide of the war. The scientists reacted with a mixture of horror and fascination. Some called the weapons barbaric. Others wanted to study them further. All agreed that the galaxy had changed fundamentally. The old ideals of purely defensive warfare were gone, replaced by a more pragmatic understanding of military power. These technologies will be shared under strict protocols, Cross explained. But make no mistake, humanity retains final authority over their deployment. We will not allow them to be misused or turned against us. Admiral Sullivan oversaw the creation of a joint defense force that combined human tactical doctrine with alien technology. The new force trained under human instructors who taught them lessons learned through centuries of conflict. Many alien commanders struggled with the intensity of the training, but they persevered because they understood its necessity. Sullivan implemented mandatory war readiness drills for all member species. Every world in council space had to maintain defensive capabilities and participate in regular exercises. Some species objected to the militarization of their societies. Sullivan's response was simple. The Xinthians attacked because you were weak. Strength is not aggression. Strength is what allows you to maintain peace. 5 years after the war ended, the galaxy had settled into its new reality. The Council's precious peace had been replaced by something more durable but less comfortable. It was an armed peace maintained through vigilance rather than optimism. Admiral Morrison, promoted again after his continued service, walked through the rebuilt council chambers. The structure had been moved to a new location, closer to human space. The chambers themselves looked similar to the old ones, but the atmosphere was different. There was a sense of purpose now, a recognition that peace required effort. He stopped at a memorial wall listing casualties from all species who had died in the war. The names covered an entire section of the chamber, thousands upon thousands of beings who had paid the price for the Council's complacency. Among them were 7,000 human names, soldiers who had given everything to protect strangers. Morrison traced his fingers over some of the names. Lieutenant Clark, who had died when her ship was destroyed covering a retreat. Chief Engineer Mendez, killed while repairing critical systems under fire. Commander Patterson's brother, lost in a boarding action. So many names, each one representing a life cut short. A young alien officer approached him. She was Karathi. Her wings folded respectfully as she studied the memorial. Admiral Morrison, she said quietly. May I ask you a question? Morrison turned to face her. Of course, what was humanity's secret? She asked. How did you defeat the Xinthians when they should have crushed you? They had better technology, larger fleets, thousands of years of experience. By every measure, they should have won. Morrison considered the question. He thought about the battles, the losses, the desperate fights against overwhelming odds. He thought about the soldiers who kept fighting even when victory seemed impossible. "We remembered what you forgot," he said finally. "Peace is not free. It must be earned and defended. The Xinthians had better technology, yes, but we had something more important. We had the will to do whatever was necessary to win. We understood that sometimes you have to fight wars you do not want in order to protect the peace you cherish." The young officer nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She looked at the memorial wall with new understanding. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's warnings. They had dismissed human concerns as paranoia. And when the war came, they learned too late that the humans had been right all along. Morrison left the chamber and walked through the corridors of the council building. Around him, delegates from dozens of species went about their business. But now there were human soldiers at key positions, quietly watching and protecting. The old council had relied on goodwill and trust. The new council relied on strength and verification. It was not the peace the galaxy had once known. It was harder, colder, and demanded constant vigilance, but it was real. It would last because it was built on strength rather than wishful thinking,